Comics can come in all different sizes, from 2-page mini comics all the way to 200-page graphic novels. You've probably been told, make a mini comic, start with a short comic. And you're thinking to yourself, how the hell am I gonna fit my entire story into 6 pages? Well, in today's episode, that's exactly what we're gonna go over. Hi, I'm Chris, welcome to Panels in Progress, and today's episode is all about the different various ways you can tell a story, from 2 pages all the way to 200 pages if needed. Let's get into it. So where do we begin? I guess let's start with the shorter comics. Obviously, you can tell a 4-panel comic, which is a 1-page comic, 4-koma manga, however you want to call it. Those stories are usually jokes, things like that, short setups. There's not a lot of time for world building. Those types of short comics are perfect for one-liners and characters that are in a greater world. For example, some manga artists do this where they have their ongoing story and then they have these short little 4-panel comics that add a little bit more depth to the world, usually jokes. So obviously that is an option for you. But today we're talking about telling stories. And let's start with the 2-page comic. A lot of people overlook 2-page comics because what the heck can you do with 2 pages? Well, you can actually do a lot more than you think. You can use these as practice. You can introduce a character. You can introduce a situation. These are great for visual experiences and setting pacing and rhythm. Or maybe it's used for quick horror, quick comedy. You can set up just a short scenario with a 2-page comic. Some examples could be a character discovers something unsettling, a joke that lands on the last panel, and a before and after moment. The Shonen Jump Guide to Making Manga has 2 great examples of how to do a 2-page comic. Definitely, if you haven't gotten this book, check it out, read it. I actually did both stories in here as practice, and I found it quite useful. So check it out. Let's move on to the next. It's 4 to 6 pages. So in this, you have a little bit extra time. So you can do a little bit more with a 4 to 6 page comic. Great for short stories. You could have a very clear beginning, middle, and end with a 4 to 6 page comic. It could be a short action sequence. Maybe it's just the middle scene of the story or climax. Maybe it's just the ending of a story. It doesn't necessarily have to be complete unless you want it to be complete. This tier is another great way to practice the storytelling mechanics of making comics in a shorter, more succinct form. These comics can easily be done in a week or a weekend if you really push yourself. And again, just like with the 2-page, you can use these comics to practice your storytelling mechanics, your pacing, and your page turns and reveals. Some examples might include a character faces a challenge and makes a decision. It could be an action set piece with a good payoff, or it could be a slice of life comic with one turning point. Let's move on to 8 to 12 page comics. So now we're getting a little bit bigger. We got a lot more space. That difference between that 4 to 6 and the 8 to 12 doesn't seem like it's too much of a big deal, but you'd be amazed with how much story you can pack into 12 pages if written correctly. This is a full short story. You now have the space you need to do your beginning, middle, and end, and maybe even a little bit of world building in between. You can introduce a character, maybe 2 characters, and really set the scene. And if you add in a emotional arc, you also have the ability to let that breathe, not just moving on to the next thing. Another thing about the 8 to 12 page comic that is different, whereas the previous versions of the comic, I would recommend only having 1 scene. In this, you can have 2 scenes. I think 3 would be pushing it at the 8 to 12, but 2 scenes would work just fine here. The 8 to 12 page comic gives you enough time to do some character building in order to get your reader interested in your characters and perhaps your world as well. You definitely don't have time to do an exposition dump, so just leave that out, but you can set the stage and let your reader have hints about the world building that you've done, even though you're not directly saying it. So some common examples for an 8 to 12 page comic might be character entering a new world. Maybe they're crossing a portal, they're experiencing something completely different than the ordinary world into the fantasy world. It could be a magical encounter that changes them in some way, or once again, a struggle that changes them in some ways, a challenge that must be overcame, and you can actually write how they overcame it with that 8 to 12 pages. And once again, horror can be done 8 to 12 pages. You're gonna drop your character right into the action, but give yourself that time you need to get that story to the tension that you want it to have. 8 to 12 pages is a great medium between not too short but not too long. A lot of beginner artists can find that using the 8 to 12 page limit as their story length doable. This is great for beginners, a great way to start your journey. You want to tell a story, but you don't want to get too deep into the details. Start here, 8 to 12 pages. Next is the 16 to 20 page comic. This one could be considered a one-shot as well. And I believe if you think of regular comic formats, it's about 24 pages, 4 pages of advertisements or something like that. But 16 to 20 pages, this is a solid story. This is where you can really flex your storytelling abilities. It can be a fully fleshed out standalone story. You can have multiple characters, multiple scenes. You can do a lot with 16 to 20 pages. You can even have an A story and a B story. So your main storyline and a B subplot if you want to give that a try. If you're writing a story, this is a great way to practice your storytelling abilities, knowing that you have that definitive end, how everything needs to wrap up. This is great practice for pacing and storytelling. I mean, really, all of these comic lengths are perfect for storytelling, but all depends on the story you want to tell and how you want to tell it and what's your purpose in telling the story as well. In a 16 to 20 page comic, you'll have the space for your emotional beats, your reveals, your climax, your dramatic twist. You'll have that space that your story needs. It won't be rapid fast, basically. Some examples could be you have a hero that faces a challenge and how they overcome it with maybe a twist in the middle. 2, a mystery unfolds where you're not quite sure how the mystery is going to resolve, but you get that twist and then the resolution. Or a heartfelt drama that builds slowly that you can take your time with. Maybe there's a emotion that you're trying to portray, a moment between two characters. Maybe the two characters had a fight at the beginning of the comic. Somehow in the middle they reach a understanding, and then at the end they are now best friends again. Something like that. This one is perfect for if you want to get an idea across. I would consider this a one shot, as well as the next one that I'm about to talk about a one shot as well, and that's the 24 to 32 pages. 24 to 32 pages is a full comic, is a full one shot. This could be a full chapter if you're doing manga. Sometimes manga chapters are less, sometimes they're more. I read I think Vinland Saga's very first chapter is like 90 something pages. Completely worth it, but first chapter or a one shot can be as long as you want it to be, as long as it tells that full story. And sometimes, even if it doesn't tell the full story, it keeps the reader wanting more and more of that comic. So everything that you've been doing with all the other pages, you can do here with even more ease. You can have multiple characters. You can have those background characters, multiple scenes, different locations for your characters to adventure to, or what have you. You can do a lot with this page limit. However, I would be cautious, because when you know that you have 32 pages, sometimes you can accidentally add in filler, and you don't want that. You want your readers to have a nice pace as they move through your story. You want it to constantly be progressing forward, not necessarily so fast that things are unclear, but you want it to be paced in a way that it takes them through the story. I think we've all experienced it, where we are reading a comic, we're reading a manga, and there's a lot of exciting things happen, and then it cuts over to this B plot that we couldn't care any less about, and now we're like, man, when are we going to get back to the main character? When are we going to get back to the main story? You got to be more aware of those things. You don't necessarily want to keep your pacing at a high level, but you never want to drop your pacing so low that the reader decides, you know what, I don't need to turn the page, I don't need to keep reading, I'm just going to take a pause here and I'll come back later. If they do. This format is perfect for publishing. I mean, you can share any of your comic regardless of the page length. I think a good story is worth sharing regardless of if it's 2 pages, 32 pages, 3,200 pages. Like, if it's a good story, it's definitely worth sharing. But this one in particular, if you're doing competitions where you're like silent manga competitions or webtoon competitions, usually you're gonna fall somewhere in between 24 to 32 pages. And I mean, the examples given for this is you can do it all. You can have your beginning, middle, and end. You can have your plot twist. You can have your reveals, your climax to the story. You can have your suspense. Anything that you want to do with a story can be done in 32 pages. And if you feel like you can't do it in 32 pages, you might want to recheck that story and see if it needs to be rewritten or edited, so that way you can do it in 32 pages. And now, the grand finale of this video, 40 plus pages. What is this? 40 plus pages could be a extensive one-shot. It could be a full-length graphic novel. 40 plus, I mean, usually a graphic novel could be about 200 pages, could be about 100. A graphic novel can really be as long as you want. 40 plus pages, you are in the territory of doing it all. You have a cast of characters now. You have an array of scenes, locations. You're doing the world building. Like, this comic is completely thought out because you have the space to do it. Still, you got to be mindful of those exposition dumps. Nobody wants those. Make the reader want to know more. Make the reader ask the question, and then you provide the answer. Not give answers before they've even asked the questions, because you have to give them a reason to care. But in this 40 plus pages, the world is yours. But because this is a big task, I still would not recommend that 40 plus pages be your very first comic. There's a lot of things that you're going to run into when you're making comics. There's a lot of things you're going to find out, not only about yourself, but about the comic itself as you're making comics. And when you're knee deep in 40 plus pages, 100 plus pages, you're going to find out how you really feel about making comics. And that's not to deter you. That's just to kind of set your expectations that sometimes you don't necessarily want to start at what is considered advanced level. Use those other formats to build up your endurance for this comic, because 40 pages, depending on your lifestyle, especially if you have a 9-to-5 job, 40 pages could take 6 months, could take a year, could take 2 years. It really depends on how often you're really working on the comic. But the longer the comic gets, you can extend how long it's going to take you to create it even more. So it's not for the faint of heart. If you are making this length of a comic, more power to you. I really hope you finish it, because you'd be really surprised at how many people do not finish their comics. So if you're doing 40 plus pages, hopefully you've done your due diligence to work on all those shorter comics to give you the energy to know that you can finish a project. And really, if you think about it, that's what all these other lengths are all about, giving you the confidence you need to finish a project. One thing that could happen is the chicken or the egg situation. Should I know how long my story is going to be first, or should I make the story first and then figure out how long it's going to be page length? And I really think that it's up to you and how you work when it comes to stories. You might have to ask yourself a few questions, like, if you already got the story written, how many characters do you have? How many locations do you have? Is this a complex story, or is this a very simple story? Because all of the answers to those questions are going to depend on where you can fit your story in. If you've got a cast of 50 plus characters and 20 different locations, there is no way you're going to fit all of that into a 6-page comic. And if you do, oh my god, like, great, but I just don't think that's possible. But let's say you've got 2 characters, 1 location, a simple problem. Obviously that can easily fit into a mini comic, so you can really pick where you want your story to be. The more characters you have, the more locations you have, and the complexity of the story really depends on if you can whittle it down. And maybe if you can whittle it down to its bare essentials, maybe you can fit a short story from that world. It's worth giving a try. I'm going to give you a short synopsis of how you can match your story to a page length. You can screenshot this, just me helping you out, so that way in the future as you're writing your story, you know pretty much where your comic is going to land. And here it is. 2 pages. A character opens a door to find something impossible. 6 pages. A shy kid tries to confess their feelings but backs out and something changes. 12 pages. A wanderer helps a lost creature and learns something about themselves. 20 pages. A full conflict where someone starts one way and ends another. 30 pages. A pilot issue introducing a world, character, and a problem. 40 plus pages. A contained adventure with rising stakes and a clear emotional journey. And there you have it. I really hope that helps, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Just remember, there is no right length to your story. Only you can know how long it's going to take you to tell your story. Only you can know whether it's going to take 4 pages to tell the story or it's going to take 40 pages to tell the story. As long as you're enjoying the process, then you're already winning. Just like all the other people who have come long before me, I do recommend trying out those short stories. You'd be amazed with how much fun you can have telling a short story, a short scene. And who knows, maybe if you make enough short stories, you can combine all of them into one anthology. So if this helped you, let me know in the comment section below. Are you going to start a short story? Are you going to try any of these variations? And if so, which one are you going to pick? Currently, I'm working on a 6-page mini comic myself, and I'll be sharing my process here on this channel. If you're interested in that, please hit subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time.